Hey everybody, welcome to the video. Let's go over the 11-game MLB DFS slate for today on Draftkings. But before we continue, as always, if you guys could just leave a like, and if you're new to the channel, you might as well hit that subscribe button. I'm going to be here all season long trying to help you guys become better MLB DFS players, and I cover other sports as well. So if you're going to keep coming back to the channel each and every single day, or each and every single week, you might as well hit that subscribe button, turn on the notification bell so you don't miss out whenever I post new content. You also follow me on social media. I'm at ChrisPennell16 on Twitter, CPen16 on IG. And if you want some more content over on Patreon, it's always much appreciated. We have 300 plus people in there. You can hop into the Discord chat, and I have a bunch of other stuff that I update there throughout the day as well. The top stacks, the cheat sheet with all the notes on the players I like, the pitchers data sheet, the hitters data sheet, and all that fun stuff. So if you're interested, links in the description below. If you're not, that's fine. Let's just dive into today's slate. So pitching on this slate isn't great. There's a couple of options that I do like, but outside of a few of these guys, and for the most part, I really only like Ryu and Stripling. The other guys are more tournament options, but there's not a lot to like in pitchers. There's no aces on the slate like Max Scherzer, Jacob deGrom, Garrett Cole, no one like that. The bats are fine. There's quite a few good spots for bats, especially the Dodgers, which we'll talk about. But for the most part, pitching, limited player pool for me. There's a couple of other guys you could look at that I don't have on the sheet right now, but for the most part, these are the kind of guys I'm locking into. So we'll start up top with Ryu. He comes in at 9,400, and he gets a soft matchup versus the Orioles. Now, I do that with quotation marks because they've actually had some decent games so far this season. They scored, 4 or 5 runs on Max Scherzer yesterday. Now, he still struck out I think he struck out 10 or 11. He still had like 24 fantasy points. It was fine because the strikeouts were there, but they've actually had some decent offensive games so far, and Vegas is giving them a little bit credit. I thought for sure this team total would be below 4 versus Ryu, but sitting at 4.13 right now. Now, that could come down throughout the day, but it's kind of up there at the moment. But he's a favorite here, 5 strikeouts in Vegas, and for the most part, Ryu should be fine. He's a pretty good pitcher, and he's not a huge strikeout guy with only a 23% K rate last season, but overall his numbers are really good. He has elite control at a 3% walk rate, limits to hard contact, less than a home run per 9 innings, 3.32 xFIP, had a 2.32 ERA last season. Now, his first 2 starts of the year were pretty shaky, but he's been dialed in the past 2 starts. He scored 28.9 points versus the Braves, then 23.1 versus the Marlins. The strikeouts have also came up to 8 and 7, and the pitch count's been anywhere from around 90 to 97 pitches. So we don't have to really worry about pitch count here with Ryu, and I think he should have a pretty decent outing here versus the Orioles. Like I said, they've had some decent games so far this season, but I think when it's all said and done, they should have one of the worst offenses stats-wise in the AL. And if you're looking at their splits versus lefties, they had a 26% K rate, 154 ISO, 301 WOBA, 85 WRC+. This is a pretty soft matchup, and we've seen pitchers rack up strikeouts versus the Orioles, even though they've actually had some somewhat okay power so far this season. But I like Ryu quite a bit, and he's probably where I'm going to end up going in cash games. I think for cash games, most people are going to go Ryu and Stripling. It just seems like the obvious choice. Because what I usually do, the first thing I do on DraftKings when the salaries come out for the next slate, I go to the pitchers and I just scroll down and see who passes the eye test for me. Then I look into the statistics. But the only guys that really popped off the page for me was Ryu and Stripling. And I threw a couple of these other guys here for tournament options. But I do like Ryu if you're spending up. He also doesn't break the bank at 9,400 either. Then going down to a GPP option and Zach Gallen, 8,800. He's a pretty good pitcher. Now, there's no team total out for this game, but I think he should get some respect in Vegas. And I do prefer using righties compared to lefties versus Oakland, because if you're looking at their splits versus lefties compared to righties, it's pretty rough on the lefties. 18% strikeout rate, which is very low. 222 ISO, which is insanely high. 115 WRC+, and just overall elite numbers. Now those numbers get worse versus righties with a 22% K rate, 187 ISO, 98 WRC+. And the thing is with Gallen, he's a good pitcher that has some strikeout potential. Last season he had a 29% K rate, really good ERA, but the xFIP was about a run and a half higher at 4.15. But for the most part, he's a really good pitcher. And if you're looking at his numbers this season, he's actually been pretty darn good. He's had 21 points, 17, 23, 14. The strikeouts have been up as well, 9, 6, 7, and 6. Pitch count should be an issue. Now, in his first start, and if you're looking at his numbers last year, he had 11% walk rate. And in his first start of the season, he had 5 walks, which is obviously horrendous. I hate guys that just walk a bunch of guys because that means the pitch count's getting up there, and he's not going to go too deep into the game. But after his first start, he had 1 walk, and 0. So he really got his control and I was going to say his control and command, but kind of the same thing. But you guys get the idea. He's been able to tone down the walks, which is obviously good. Now, I do like the righties versus Oakland. Now, the one risk here is I saw I was reading some stuff, and apparently they're going to open the roof here in Arizona, which, not here, I'm not in Arizona, but they're going to open up the roof in Arizona, which, if you guys don't know anything about Arizona, it's very hot, around 100 degrees most days, if not higher, especially in the summer. And you guys know anything about the weather in baseball, when it's hot, the ball will travel. So that could be a little bit of a concern there, but I still like Gallen quite a bit. I mean, I don't think he's going to just serve up a bunch of homers. And I think the strikeouts rate is definitely there. And I think he's going to be lower owned than Ryu, so if you want a tournament option, I don't mind Gallen. But the chalkiest pitcher on the slate, I mean, I don't even have to look at ownership projections to know this. It's going to be Ross Stripling at 7,900. I mean, I think he's just pretty much the obvious play here, and he's below 8K at 7,900. He's very easy to fit in as your SP2. I mean, there's a scenario where it could be your SP1 if you want to just load up on bats, but I don't really think you have to make Stripling your SP1. I don't think it's that hard to fit in Ryu or Gallen with Stripling because you're not really breaking the bank with any of these pitchers. But Vegas likes Stripling, 3.75 runs against him, 72% K rate, 5 strikeouts. Good pitcher, 3.58 xFIP, 25% K rate, high ground ball guy, doesn't really give up too much hard contact, only a 5% walk rate, so he's got excellent command. Now, he's had a up and down season so far. He did give up a grand slam to Manny Machado in his last start, but thankfully he gave up 6 runs, but only 2 were earned. So saved his day fantasy-wise, still only scored 9 points, but it could have been a lot worse. He was getting really unlucky with errors. But 29 points versus the Giants, 9 versus the Diamondbacks, and 18 versus San Diego the start before that. I think he's going to be fine here. And the Mariners are a team we can certainly pick on. They do strike out quite a bit. If you're looking at their splits versus righties, they had a 25.7% K rate. There's a little bit of power in there, but Stripling's not a guy I expect to get, a lot of home runs launched off of him. So I like Stripling quite a bit, and he's going to be pretty high owned on this slate. Then another tournament option, which I don't feel great about, it's Jordan Lyles, 7,300. Honestly, I probably shouldn't even have him on here, but I don't know. I like righties versus the Padres. Now, they have an excellent lineup. They got Grisham, Pham, if he's not injured, but it sounds like he's probably not going to end up playing, but we'll see. But they have Manny Machado, Tatis, Hosmer, Myers. They got a pretty good lineup, but they do strike out a bit versus righties. Looking at their splits, I mean, they had a 26.2% K rate to righties, 89 WRC plus 308 WOBA. Now, they have a good lineup, so there's a lot of power risk here, and Lyles has not been great so far this season. If I can just pull up his game log really quick. It's just not been pretty for Jordan Lyles. He has a 6.06 ERA this season. He scored 7, -1, 15, and 4 points this year. So not great. The strikeouts haven't been there either, but he's tougher on righties, so see a good deal of righties, and pretty much the best hitters in this lineup are right-handed bats for the most part, and Machado and Fernando Tatis. Now they have some other solid options that are lefties, like Trent Grisham and some others, like Hosmer, but he's interesting at 7,300, and the pitching is not that great on the slate, and Texas is no longer a hitter's paradise, so he's got that working for him as well. But man, I don't know how I feel about Jordan Lyles here. He had a decent strikeout rate last season at 24%, but he is someone that just gets smashed with lefties. I mean, 277 ISO given up, 12% walk rate. Now to righties, he was pretty darn good. 164 ISO, 277 WOBA, 25% strikeout rate. So if he can handle Machado and Tatis well, I don't think he's gonna have the worst day in the world. But I mean, what he's done this season does give me too much confidence. So he's pretty much a GPP play here, but he's somewhat interesting versus the Padres team, who is better versus left-handed pitching than they are versus righties. But for the most part, pitching's pretty barren on this slate. I think Stripling and Ryu is probably the best option, but I also like Gallen in tournaments. And then we'll move on to the bats. And quite a few good options on the slate. You got Minnesota, we got Toronto, the Dodgers, the Astros are even somewhat interesting here. You also look at the White Sox. I mean, there's a lot of spots you can go in the slate. I didn't even mention the Yankees, who have a team total of like 5.5. But let's start up top with catcher. He's coming in at 5,000. Mitch Garver, he should be hitting leadoff here versus the lefty, and Chris Bubich. I've always can't remember how to say this guy's name, but all I know is I like the Twins quite a bit on this slate, especially the righties. They have one of the higher team totals at 5.37. If you're looking at Garver's splits versus lefties last year, now Garver hasn't been that great this season, but if you're looking at the numbers, I mean, 415 ISO to lefties, 198 WRC plus, 321 batting average, just elite numbers all around. And I really like the Twins power righties on this slate. And you can also look at some of the cheaper options as well. Some of the guys that don't pack a ton of power, but they are interesting, especially if they're cheap on a team stack that I like. Danny Jansen, he seems a little bit pricey here at 4,000, but I do like the Blue Jays on this slate. I don't have all the Blue Jays listed, so you can look at some of the other guys like Randall Grichuk. And I'd probably left a couple of guys off that I could be talking about, but just know I like the Blue Jays. Now, Alex Cobb has had some decent games so far this season, and I'm actually surprised that the Blue Jays team total is not above 5. I really thought it would be. That could change throughout the day. But I guess they're giving a little bit of respect to Cobb, who's not been bad this season. I mean, he's had 23 points, 4, 20, and 9. I mean, he's been okay. But he's just not someone I really respect too much. So, and the Orioles bullpen's so bad, so I think the Blue Jays are a decent stack on this slate. A couple of these guys are really expensive, but Alex Cobb's not someone I'm going to run away from, especially if they get to the Orioles bullpen soon enough. So I don't mind Jansen here just because I like the Blue Jays, and I pretty much always like targeting the Orioles. He's a much better hitter versus lefties compared to righties, but I just like the Blue Jays on the slate. Then Travis d'Arnaud, if he makes the lineup, only 2,500. He did not make the lineup yesterday, but if he's batting second at 2,500 versus Anibal Sanchez, I will be all about that. Now I prefer him versus lefties, like I did with Jansen. I mean, d'Arnaud's got some really good splits versus lefties, 276 ISO. Now for righties, those do fall off a cliff quite a bit, but at 2,500, if he's batting second, it's going to be hard to pass up. And if you're looking at Sanchez's numbers, he's not a high strikeout guy. Gives up more power to lefties, but only a 19% K rate to righties, 7% walk rate, and just overall a guy I'm not going to be too scared of. So don't mind d'Arnaud. And they actually have a pretty high team total on the site at 5.48, which I thought was a little surprisingly high. So I think some of the Braves here are certainly in play, but I don't really have many of them listed. Now dropping down to first base, one of the best plays on the entire slate is Cody Bellinger. I'll probably just end up making him my thumbnail picture, but I love the Dodgers here versus Justin Dunn. He is just not that great of a pitcher, and they have the highest team total on the slate at 6.25. That's almost like a Coors Field total for the Dodgers. Now, if the Dodgers were in Coors Field, I mean, we might get a team total of close to 8 for sure, depending on who the pitcher is on the mound. But I remember last year the Dodgers in Coors Field were just an absolute smash spot. I mean, they went off almost every single slate, I think. But anyway, getting ahead of myself, Cody Bellinger versus the righty. I mean, amazing numbers. You guys get the idea. 328 ISO, 416 on base percentage, 167 WRC plus, 317 batting average. You guys don't need me to tell you that Cody Bellinger is a good play versus Justin Dunn today. Now the splits last season wasn't a big enough sample size to really put too much stock into it. 0 ISO to lefties, 0 ISO to righties. Obviously, that's not going to be the case. And Justin Dunn's not been someone that's been great this season, so I think you can just stack up every single Dodgers that you can in your lineup today, and I would feel pretty good about it. So love the Dodgers. He's also eligible outfield as well, which I'll probably end up, if I use Cody Bellinger, which I assume I will, I'll end up using him in the outfield probably instead of first base. But I mean, I could potentially use him at first base, but I don't know. It just feels weird plugging Bellinger in at first base because I think outfield, we'll see. Outfield's pretty loaded, so either way, he's eligible at both, so you can make up your mind there. But Miguel Sano, 4,900. Don't love paying this much for Miguel Sano, but I like the power righties here versus the Royals. They have one of the higher team totals on the slate, and Sano can certainly crush left-handed pitching. If you're looking at his splits, last season, 367 ISO, 157 WRC plus, 651 slugging. He strikes out a ton at 33%, so it's infuriating watching your guy that's 5K just strike out a bunch, but there's definitely double dunk potential for Miguel Sano, and I like all the Twins today, so he certainly makes some sense. Then Rowdy Tellez, 3,400. I think he should end up being a pretty popular value option. You could also look at Miguel Cabrera and Michael Chavez, who are both facing lefties, which they both have decent splits versus lefties. But I don't mind Tellez here. I do like the Blue Jays on this slate, even though their team total is lower than I would expect. But Cobb has been decent this season, so he hasn't been a gas can. So I guess we'll give him a little bit of respect there. But I do like using teams versus the Orioles because their bullpen sucks, and for the most part, their pitching staff's pretty horrendous. Now, Tellez was a guy that was better versus lefties last season compared to righties. But still, I mean, it's just cheap power. 212 ISO to righties last season. He's pretty cheap at 3,400. Should be hitting near the middle of the order as well. Then up down to second base, we have Cavan Biggio, who's also eligible in the outfield. But, I mean, he's obviously an excellent play here versus Alex Cobb. Now, like I said, Alex Cobb has not been horrendous this season, but I definitely like Biggio against the Orioles, and I was looking at his splits last season to righties. Really good numbers. He had a 41% fly ball rate. I love getting guys that can hit the ball in the air, and only a 19% ground ball rate. 233 batting average is not great. Neither is a 28% strikeout rate, but a 225 ISO, 361 on base percentage, I think is a fine option if you have the money. He's also eligible in the outfield as well. Max Muncy, just staying with this Dodgers stack, 4,800, one of the best plays on the slate. I mean, pretty much anyone on the Dodgers is going to be a top play on the entire slate. Highest team total, and he crushes left-handed and right-handed pitching, so it doesn't really matter who comes in after Justin Dunn. I like Max Muncy quite a bit. Elite number to righties. Then if you need a value option, we have Abraham Toro here at 2,600. Now, if you're looking at splits versus lefties, we don't really have anything. Last season is much better versus righties, but I still think he's usable here. He's going to be batting in the bottom of the order, but I do like the Astros. Now, Kyle Freeland has not been a bad pitcher so far. I believe he's had a quality start each and every single outing so far, which I think is, 4 for 4. So we'll give Freeland some respect there, but he's not someone I'm going to shy away from, and I still think we can use the Astros on this slate, so I'm not going to be too scared off from Kyle Freeland. But he's not pitching in Coors Field, so it's also another boost for him. But Toro's fine if you have a complete value option because we can't spend up at every single position. So I threw Toro in. He's okay. Then dropping down to third base, I actually have like 5 options here. I didn't mean to put that much, so I do apologize. But there's a lot of good options at third today. There's 3 good spend-up options, and there's a couple of good value as well. But We'll start with Bregman here, who just crushes left-handed pitching. Kyle Freeland, like I said, he's been okay this season, but he's someone that will struggle with righty power. If you're looking at Bregman splits versus righties, I mean, elite numbers, only 11% K rate, 400 ISO, 205 WRC plus, almost JD Martinez-like numbers, so we can certainly look Bregman's way. And the Astros are one of the better stacks on the slate with over a 5-team total. Anthony Rendon versus lefty is always playable. He's got elite numbers versus lefties as well. Kind of like Alex Bregman, not as good numbers as Alex Bregman, but very similar numbers. And if you're looking at Anderson's splits last year versus righties, he only had a 19% strikeout rate, over a 400 WOBA, and a 368 ISO. So we can certainly look some of these righties' ways on the Angels. And then Justin Turner, 4,800. I prefer using Turner versus left-handed pitching, but the Dodgers are such a good play in this slate. At 4,800, I have no problem just plugging in Justin Turner for the price tag. I mean, he's still got okay splits versus righties, and near 300 batting average, only a 14% K rate. The ISO comes down from, 294 to lefties to 182 to righties, but still a solid hitter overall. So I like Justin Turner for the price tag, and I like all the Dodgers quite a bit on this slate. Then if you need some value here, we have Marwin Gonzalez and Travis Shaw checking in at the same price tag. Marwin Gonzalez is someone that's better versus left-handed pitching in terms of batting average. He has a 300 batting average to lefties compared to 249 to righties, and a little bit more power as well. So I like Marwin Gonzalez, should be hitting near the middle of the order versus the lefty. And I like the Twins on this slate quite a bit. Then Travis Shaw, 3,900. I have some interest in the Blue Jays. I was a little concerning that the team total was not as high as I thought it would be, but, Vegas isn't always right. I do think the Blue Jays can certainly do some damage here versus Alex Cobb. And if you're looking at Shaw's splits, he's someone you're definitely going to use versus righties compared to lefties. Now, the numbers last season were pretty awful to both sides of the plate. High strikeout rate, not a lot of power, just overall very bad numbers. He had a batting average of 102 versus lefties and 171 to righties. But he's a decent power option here versus Alex Cobb as a lefty. So I like Travis Shaw, should be hitting near the top of the order. Shortstop, Corey Seager, again, I love all the Dodgers here, and should be hitting near the top of the order. He's only 4,800. I think he can very well be over 5K on this slate, especially because of how good of a spot the Dodgers are in. So I like Corey Seager a lot. I mean, good splits versus righties. I don't think I have to go too in-depth here, guys. I like the Dodgers, and I don't think I really need to go too in-depth each time on the Dodgers, guys. Tim Anderson, 4,500. He's going to be going up against Matthew Boyd, which I got to fix. Sorry, I had Michael Fulmer still in a pitcher today. I don't know why, but I did fix that. It's going to be Matthew Boyd. Now, Matthew Boyd is a good strikeout pitcher, but he's not been great that season. He's certainly been someone that's been hittable, and I don't mind some of the righties here on the White Sox versus Matthew Boyd. They do have a team total over 5, so I actually think the White Sox are a decent stack on this slate. I just don't love stacking against Matthew Boyd because of the strikeout rate, but you can certainly use some of the White Sox here, and they have plenty of power in their lineup. And if you're looking at Tim Anderson, not a huge power guy, but very good contact hitter versus lefties. 326 batting average, 18% K rate. Doesn't walk a lot, but he's an interesting option at 4,500. I mean, I'm not in love with the White Sox today, but I think you can target some of these guys as one-offs. Or if you want to get tournamenty, you can stack them up. And then we have Jorge Polanco, 4,300. Now, I prefer him versus right-handed pitching compared to lefties. I mean, if you're just looking at his splits, pretty much everything is worse to lefties compared to righties. I mean, much better hitter versus right-handed pitching. But, I'm not really scared of Bubic, either way. I think the Twins are going to be fine here versus him, and they'll get to the bullpen eventually, which the Royals bullpen's not that great, so I like Polanco. Should be near the top of the order. Then we have Chris Taylor, who's also eligible in the outfield, but he's 3,300. Prefer him versus lefties, where he's got a 262 ISO and just overall better numbers, but the batting average is actually higher versus righties, but does strike out quite a bit, but he's a cheap option. He's going to be near the bottom of the order, but I like all the Dodgers, so if you can get a cheap one, I have no issue with that. Then dropping into the outfield, we have Mike Trout, 6,100. The Angels are actually in a pretty good spot on the slate versus Anderson. I talked about that earlier. Now, he actually had a pretty good strikeout rate to lefties last season. If we can pull up his splits here. Hold on. Lost my spot for a second. So versus lefties, he had a 28% strikeout rate, which is pretty good. But versus the righties, that drops down to 19%. He actually gave up more power to lefties last season, but overall, I mean, he got smashed versus both sides of the plate, so I like pretty much all the Angels here. And they have one of the higher team totals on the slate, because I looked at another site, and it was actually up. One I pulled from did not have it out yet, but I thought it was close to 5.5, if not more, so they are certainly playable. The only problem is a lot of them are expensive, the righties, so. But I do like Mike Trout. I mean, I don't think I have to really tell you guys why I like Mike Trout. He crushes lefties, and righties is the best player in baseball. I don't think we need to go beyond that. Mookie Betts, he's been hot recently. He's been hitting the wall very well. Only 5,900. I say only 5,900. I was looking at Mike Trout's salary, but he's 5,900. He's not only 5,900. He's a pretty penny to pay, but it's Mookie Betts, one of the best hitters in baseball. Justin Dunn, not a great pitcher whatsoever. Now, if you're looking at his splits, he had better splits versus righties compared to lefties last season, but he's great versus both sides of the plate. And I like all the Dodgers here. Now, I would assume most people will go with Cody Bellinger over Mookie Betts. So I think if you're playing Betts, you'll get lower ownership. So he's probably the GPP option compared to the cash option with Cody Bellinger. He's also a bit more expensive too at $5,900 compared to $51 for Bellinger. So yeah, I'd say Mookie Betts more of a tournament play. Bellinger is going to be your cash play. If you can play both, great. But I don't know if you're going to be able to pay that much for both of those Dodgers guys. But I do like Mookie. Nelson Cruz facing a lefty. I mean, that speaks for itself. Anytime Nelson Cruz goes up versus a lefty, he's going to be one of the top home run threats on the entire slate. Now, you got to pay an arm and a leg for him nowadays. I know earlier in the season, we could play Nelson Cruz at like 4,500 versus lefties. I mean, that was just an absolute lock. Now, 5,700, he's got to be like a staple of your lineup, so it's not just some plug-in cash play. But he's certainly got double dunk potential here. I mean, 461 ISO to lefties, 195 WRC plus, elite numbers all around. Like JD Martinez like numbers, which we'll talk about JD in a little bit because he is facing a lefty. But you got to like Nelson Cruz here versus a lefty on the mound. And they have one of the best team totals on the slate. George Springer, 4,900 facing a lefty. I mean, anytime he's facing a lefty, I'm going to have some interest in him. Now, last season, he actually had better numbers versus righties. But Kyle Freeland's not a guy I'm going to be too scared of. And if I'm going to use anyone versus Kyle Freeland, I prefer the righties if you're looking at Freeland splits. He had by 240 ISO to righties last season, only a 15% K rate compared to a 23% and a 155 ISO. So I like the righties here, and the Astros have plenty of good righties. Now, I wish Jordan Alvarez was going to play. He's day-to-day, but I don't think he's going to end up playing. So if he was playing, I'd have some interest in him as well. But unfortunately, I didn't have much confidence enough to put him on the sheet. But JD Martinez, 4,800 going against Jordan Montgomery. Not the worst pitcher in the world, and the Red Sox only have a 4.64 implied team total. So you're pretty much only using JD as a one-off. I'm not really interested in stacking up the Red Sox here. But JD Martinez versus lefty is always going to be in play for me. 42 ISO to the lefties last season, 242 WRC plus, over a 400 batting average. Like anytime he's facing a lefty, it's kind of like Nelson Cruz. He's got to be in play. Then Teoscar Hernandez. There's a couple of other Blue Jays I left off that you can look to play, like Grichuk and Gurriel. But I wanted to single out Hernandez here at 4,500. Should be betting cleanup, and I think he's in a pretty good spot here. Now, he's got similar power to both sides of the plate. Now, he does strike out a ton, 34% to righties, 29% to lefties. So he's got that risk to him, but I think he's fine in tournaments, especially if you're stacking at the Blue Jays, but he's not someone I'd really plug in for cash games for the most part. Low batting average and a high strikeout guy really doesn't sit up too well with me in cash games unless they're super cheap, which Hernandez really isn't that cheap. Then Jock Peterson, he's going to be hitting to the bottom of the order, unfortunately. I like it when he's leading off, especially at that price tag, but he's still playable in tournaments. I wouldn't play him in cash games if he's going to be hitting low in the order. But he's fine. I mean, we know how good he is versus right-handed pitching. Sucks versus lefties. Just absolutely horrendous. Always a pitch hit risk. But versus righties, 320 ISO, 571 slugging, and just great numbers all around. And I love the Dodgers, so pretty much everyone's in play here, including A.J. Pollock. He's another guy I prefer versus lefties. Or no. I got that mixed up with Jock Peterson. I like Pollock versus lefties compared to righties, but it's not like he's horrendous versus righties. He's still got a near 200 ISO, but overall the numbers do come down quite a bit. He's got a 323 batting average to lefties, only a 239 to righties, but he's fine. Should be hitting near the middle of the order, and he's dirt cheap. Then Pillar's facing a lefty. Now, Pillar's not like the greatest hitter in the world, but if you're looking at his numbers last season to lefties, not bad. 8% strikeout rate. I like guys that have high contact rates. 241 ISO, 278 batting average, 519 slugging. Pretty respectable numbers. So Pillar's in play if you need a value option. I just don't love stacking the Red Sox on the slate because Montgomery's not like a gas can out there. And then we obviously know that the Yankees have a pretty good bullpen. And Adam Eaton was the cheapest guy I found pretty interesting. Should be batting near the top of the order as usual for Adam Eaton. He's only 2,600. Now, Touki Toussaint has shown some strikeout ability this season, but I mean, 2,600 for Adam Eaton is not bad at all. I mean, splits versus righties aren't like amazing, but only a 15% K rate, 366 on base percentage. He's dirt cheap. So if you need a pump play to fit in some other guys, I don't mind Adam Eaton at 2,600. But that's going to be it for the video, guys. I hope it was helpful. If it was, remember to leave a like. If you're new to the channel, you might as well hit that subscribe button. And I'm not going to go through that whole spiel again. You guys get it. So I do appreciate you watching. Enjoy your start to the week. And hopefully we can enjoy some good baseball games tonight.